As OTAs and mandatory minicamp have officially been wrapped up, the New York Giants players and coaches now going that little dull period in between from the beginning of June until late July, even though organized activities can still be conducted by Daniel Jones and his receivers, running backs, and tight ends, as well as some of the defensive players can still get some workouts in until training camp starts happening at the end of July. But here's a couple of news and notes that the beat writers have been recording in terms of what players have been stepping up, what players have been sliding down, who's positioned where so far on the early depth chart, and what to expect heading in towards training camp in late July, and how the Giants are going to be preparing for the 2022 NFL season. What's going on, everybody? This is NYG Jeffy T, 3285, and I hope everybody's enjoying their early Friday. The weekend is here, and I'm just going to do a quick little wrap up on the OTAs and minicamp and what maybe we could expect heading towards training camp. Now, a couple of news and notes so far heading into that was happening in minicamp. There are a couple of players right now that are dealing with some minor ailments. The top three wide receivers, Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, and Kadarius Toney, they were in the red jerseys for the entire OTAs and minicamp. As we all know, Kadarius Toney got a little bit of a cleanup on his knee, and he was sidelined for that time, but it should not affect his availability going into training camp, as he should be ready to go, unless there's barring any setbacks. Kenny Golladay has been dealing with an undisclosed injury. Not really sure what the ailment is right now, even though he did participate in some of the activities in minicamp. But as long as he stays healthy and as long as everything goes well, he should be ready to go when training camp comes around. And Sterling Shepard is still recovering from the late season torn Achilles tendon. And even though Brian Dable and Joe Shane expect Shepard to be ready to go by training camp, no one would be shocked if he's extremely limited going into the beginning of training camp, and might even be put onto the PUP list and could be out for the beginning of the NFL season. Also, some other news: Blake Martinez is slowly coming back from his torn ACL that he suffered at the beginning of the 2021 season. He's been participating in some organized activities. He might be starting off slow when it comes to the beginning of the training camp. Shane Lemieux, coming off his own torn patella tendon, he was actually participating pretty much fully. He looks like he's entrenched right now as the starting left guard, even though he could have some competition from guys like Josh Azudu as well as Max Garcia. But right now, Lemieux seems to be good to go. A couple of other news and notes: Darnay Holmes has been dealing with a minor foot injury. Aaron Robinson's been dealing with a shoulder injury. So it's just like a couple of little nicks and bruises that have been happening with some of the other Giants players, but nothing really in terms of long-term worries or anything, as a lot of these guys should be ready to go by the time training camp rolls around. So in terms of the injury news, besides guys like, and Matt Peart, he's coming off an ACL injury, as well as Nick Gates coming off that devastating leg injury. Both these guys probably right now, unless they don't make the roster and unless the Giants decide to move on from both of them, I wouldn't be shocked if both these guys end up starting on the PUP list at the beginning of the season, especially Nick Gates after suffering what was such a devastating leg injury in Week 2 against the Washington Commanders, and Matt Peart coming off that torn ACL late in the 2021 season. So don't expect either one of these guys to begin the season if they're even still currently on the team. Expect both of them to probably begin the season on the PUP list, if anything. Now, in terms of some news and notes and what players have been surprising at training camp, at a mini camp, and what players have been a little bit, behind the line so far. Darius Slayton, the enigmatic wide receiver, the wide receiver that was picked in the 5th round in 2019, he's actually not had that many first-team snaps with Daniel Jones and the first-team offense, even with Golladay, Toney, and Shepard all sidelined with injuries. It's actually been guys like David Sills, Richie James, Robert Foster, and even the upstart Travis Toivonen that have been getting a lot of first-team reps with Daniel Jones, as well as Wan'Dale Robinson, the rookie out of Kentucky. Darius Slayton has been getting sparingly first-team reps at all. He's mostly been running with the second team, and if anything, Darius Slayton might be a candidate to be cut because of the fact that the New York Giants could save $2.4 million on their cap, which they're already very tight on the cap space available immediately. And they figured if Darius Slayton is having trouble right now being able to crack the first team, even with the top 3 receivers all out, that might not be a good sign for Darius Slayton's future as a New York Giant. And some other news and notes. Darnay Holmes right now is still locking down that starting slot cornerback position. You figure when they drafted Cordell Flott in the 4th round this past NFL draft that he would be able to unslurp Darnay Holmes as the slot cornerback, but nope. Darnay Holmes has come in focus and he's played pretty well so far, even though he is dealing with the foot injury at the moment. But it seems like Darnay Holmes right now is entrenched as the starting slot cornerback. Aaron Robinson seems to have the uphold right now at the starting outside cornerback after James Bradbury was released in the offseason. He seems to be the guy that's leading the pack in terms of starting at cornerback next to opposite of Adoree Jackson. And don't discount Dane Belton, who's been getting a lot of first-team snaps at the safety position, and it's a possibility that he could eventually take over as the starting safety opposite of Xavier McKinney over Julian Love, even though I do believe that Wink Martindale is going to employ a lot of 3 safety looks for this defense moving forward. So Dane Belton is starting to get a lot of looks as the starting safety, and maybe him and Love are going to interchange with each other. Tay Crowder seems to still have that lockdown at the moment as that starting linebacker, but I would not be shocked if either Micah McFadden or Darian Beavers take over as that starting linebacker opposite of Blake Martinez. The defensive line seems to be going as forward. It seems Jahide Ward is being able to lock down one of those defensive end spots opposite of Leonard Williams, and Dexter Lawrence seems to be the nose tackle at the moment. Justin Ellis, right now as the primary defensive lineman, that's going to be the backup, as well as Chris Hinton, the undrafted free agent from Michigan. And it seems like right now, if all healthy, that Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari will be the starting outside linebackers. Ellerson Smith is having himself a nice beginning of the OTAs and mandatory minicamp. He seems to be locking down that primary backup role at the outside linebacking position, as well as Quincy Roche. And Timon Fox is making a little bit of noise, trying to be able to take that last, or one of those last outside linebacking positions over a guy like O'Shane Ximines, who seems to be on the outside looking in at that position. And in terms of the tight end position, give it to Daniel Bellinger. Everything you hear right now in minicamp and in OTAs, Daniel Bellinger has been catching everything. He's been doing a great job blocking, and right now he seems to be the presumable favorite for that tight end 1 position, which is great news to hear. And even better news to hear is that Austin Allen has been getting a lot of run, as well as first-team snaps as maybe that second tight end, the undrafted free agent out of Wisconsin. So it seems like the Giants right now, early on in mandatory minicamp and in OTAs heading into training camp, that the 2 young rookies are being groomed right now to be this potential 1 and 2 tight ends. And Ricky Seals-Jones has been running with the 3rd team tight end group right now, so it's not a very good look for Ricky Seals-Jones in terms of his outlook for the tight end position. And Jordan Akins, I still believe, because he is a relationship, he's worked with the tight ends coach right now for the New York Giants, that he might have a leg up on Seals-Jones. So unless Seals-Jones starts to show something in training camp and preseason, he could be on the outside looking in. And even on the offensive line, Josh Azudu right now has been getting a lot of play at left tackle while Andrew Thomas is coming back from his ankle surgery. So Azudu looks like a guy that can be able to maybe snatch that primary backup tackle / backup guard position, or unless he could go into the training camp and beat out Shane Lemieux for that left guard position, which is wide open. And even more alarming, Matt Gano, who we signed in the offseason, we thought he could be the primary swing tackle, he's not even been getting first-team tackle position. It's been Azudu instead of Gano. Gano's actually been running with the 2nd or 3rd team so far. It's actually been Corey Cunningham that's also been getting more snaps ahead of Gano. So that might not be a good outlook for Matt Gano, who might be competing for a roster spot with the likes of Corey Cunningham and Matt Parrott for that primary swing tackle role for the New York Giants. And even more interesting is that Ben Bredesen has been getting a lot of snaps as the 2nd team starting center. So maybe they're trying to think about maybe moving Bredesen as that backup center in case John Feliciano maybe gets hurt or he doesn't get it done, that Bredesen could be groomed as that future starting center for them. because we don't know the condition or the status of Nick Gates going into the offseason. Who knows what he's really going to be like. So that's very interesting, as well as Max Garcia, the free agent we picked up out of Arizona. He's not even been getting second team snaps. He's been relegated right now to third team. So he's been behind guys like Jamil Douglas. He's been behind guys like Bredesen, behind Lemieux, behind Azudu, even Mike McKeithen, who's been getting a lot of second-team snaps with the offensive line in terms of the right guard position. So that's not a very good outlook right now for Max Garcia, which is, very interesting to think. So these are the little things that I've been picking up from the New York Giants and what's been going on in terms of the depth chart. It's not exactly like, what I'm seeing is I'm not exactly looking at right now in this part of the offseason of like, Daniel Jones is making great throws in the net. Saquon Barkley looks incredible. No, I'm really looking right now at what player is positioned at what part of the depth chart at the moment, because that could go a long way in where these players are going to be positioned and how this depth chart and how, Joe Shane, Brian Dable, Wink Martindale, Mike Kafka are going to be molding this offense and defense, and who they think has a better chance of making an impact for this team. That's what I'm looking for right now, is the positioning of the depth chart going forward and what players are positioned where so far heading into training camp. And a lot can change right now when we go into training camp. With some of these guys that have been playing well, they can maybe get hurt, or they can maybe not show something in training camp and preseason and they could lose their spots, as well as some of these other guys that are right now struggling in terms of getting second or third team snaps that can go in there and all of a sudden turn it on in the middle of training camp and preseason and be able to snatch one of those late, positions in training camp and preseason and be able to lock down a 53-man roster spot. So that's what I'm really looking forward. That's what I'm looking at right now, is what's the positioning, how players are being jockeyed around in the depth chart as we go on. And it's very interesting that some of these guys like Darius Slayton, Max Garcia, Matt Gano, and Ricky Seals-Jones right now are looking like guys that could be on the roster bubble. And some of these other guys that we brought in, some of these undrafted players, like an Austin Allen, like a Chris Hinton, like a Timon Fox. O'Shea Zimmern is another guy that's struggling to make the roster. These are some of these young players that are coming in and already starting to vie for first team, second team reps and pushing some of these veterans out the door. So that's just my little outlook right now on some of the things that have been going on in OTAs and Minicamp. Some of the players that are making some early off-season noise. Some of these players that are not getting the job done right now. A lot can change from now until going into the off-season. So it's just very interesting little aspects that have been going on and what you look for to see what players could be part of this roster moving forward into the season and what players are going to be on the outside looking in. And you have to think about what Wink Martindale, Mike Kafka, and Brian Dable are looking at their roster and who they believe can become a long-term impact for this team and who they think are going to be able to go in there and, if, God forbid, if some of the starters get hurt, they could trust some of these backups a lot more than some of these other players on this roster. And just because that OTAs and minicamp are over, that doesn't mean the grind is going to stop. A lot of these players are probably going to be conducting some of these off-season workouts that they've done before. You could see Daniel Jones taking some of his wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs to do some workouts, work on their timing, try to get some plays down from what they've learned in OTAs and minicamp. Just work on their connection, work on the concentration, try to get those things developed a lot more until they go into training camp and preseason. So that's just my little notes and nuggets that have been going on in OTAs and minicamp. If you like this video, please hit the like button on the bottom. Subscribe if you haven't already to NYG Jeffy T 3285. And hit the bell if you haven't already for the notifications for the next videos that come out. And leave and share your comments below on who you think right now in OTAs and minicamp have made the biggest impression on you. What players have really not made the impression at all. And in terms of the depth charts that have been given out so far and who's working with what team, what players you think could come out and surprise coming into the 2022 season, and what players you think are going to be on the outside looking in and won't be able to make this roster when the 53-man roster is coming out. So thank you very much. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and evening. Get ready for a very enjoyable weekend. And we'll see what happens as we head into the training camp next month for the New York Football Giants. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. And let's go, New York Football Giants.